All right, good evening. I want to start real quick before we start off the show proper with some college football. So Marshall plays Ohio State this weekend, and this is Thundering Herds coaches Charles Huff to find a way to entice some Buckeyes players who aren't getting too much time to go to West Virginia. And I quote, and he quotes, "So if they want to transfer on down, we've got a Tudor's Biscuit NIL, all you can eat. So if any of those guys that run really, really fast at Ohio State like Tudor's Biscuits, I promise you, all you can eat all day if you transfer here." I don't know about you guys, but I'm Steve Rabinowitz, and I got to go to Uber Eats real quick to order some biscuits on KFC. Introduce yourself, so I'll get back to you in a second.
I'm at this straight. I'm a big foodie, but I'm just not sure if food is going to be food would be something that would entice me to jump ship from one college to another. Hey, look, we went to Hofstra. Okay, I live right by the Hempstead Turnpike. I had Bojangles to get me through some pretty tough nights, especially during finals week. So I'm not being picky, but yeah, I think food is not exactly an enticement unless it's the Red Lobster cheddar made biscuits. Now that I would kick somebody in the gut for, or some
And I,
Popeyes.
and I'm Jay Kaplan, and as the On the Sports Lines resident Michigan fan, I'm fine with anything that sends Ohio State Buckeye players in the opposite direction from Columbus.
Of course, you would immediately turn it into a Buckeye thing. Welcome to On the Sports Lines, the Hunt for October edition. This truly is the most wonderful time of the year, one of the most wonderful times of the year. The MLB postseason, possibly with two locals, less than 2 weeks away, and the NFL season is in full swing. And by full swing, I mean still the sloppy 2 week period that almost seems like preseason to most people. We'll talk Jets, Giants, and Tua, oh my, tonight. But first, let's quickly talk about two topics, guys. We'll just quickly weigh in. So ESPN Insider, Adrian Wojnarowski announced a sudden retirement from ESPN and all sports reporting on Wednesday to go on to be the general manager of the St. Bonaventure basketball program. Anthony, a seismic and unexpected change in basketball media. What are your thoughts?
You know what? It's only ironic that the last Rose bomb that gets dropped is the one from Self. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, look, a
Yep.
37-year career in the journalism business. And people forget that Woj claim to fame was really his Twitter account because you think about the 2010s and the news of things like the Oklahoma City Thunder breaking up their big three and sending James Harden to Houston. Woj was the guy who kind of put that out there first. Think about the Donald Sterling situation in 2014. LeBron going to the Lakers after the 2018 season. So he's been kind of the forefront of a guy who has been really quick but professional as far as breaking uh NBA in season and off season transactions. I remember during the 2021 season, 2021-2022 season, we had just literally did a show 24 hours beforehand, and then my phone blows up, and Woj is dropping bomb after bomb about James Harden becoming a Brooklyn Net and the new and all the details being worked out with that. It just seems like a trade wasn't official unless Woj was the guy who's reporting it. And it's nothing against Shams, who was just as good, by the way, at doing this, being an NBA insider. But for Woj, you think about this: 37 years as a journalist, and he started out with opinionated columns, but became more right down the middle, straightforward NBA business. And he was a big get for ESPN for several years. They bringing him on a network and really introduce him to a large audience that probably didn't follow him on Twitter so much. But I say best of luck down the line. Thanks for all the breaking news over the last decade and a half or so. And and it says a lot that what was ready to turn the page. He walked away from a $35 million contract with ESPN, with a number of years left on there to go back to his alma mater. Hopefully, like every day, hopefully just like his journalism career, every day works out well, and and he's happy with this next phase of his life.
Yeah, Anthony, I literally wrote the exact same opening sentence. I guess it's somewhat fitting that the last bomb we got was the one he dropped on himself. When I saw the breaking news alert from The Athletic come across my phone, I thought maybe there was another round of layoffs at ESPN. Maybe something happened to him, but nope. None of that was the case after spending the last 7 years sleeping only 3 hours a night in order to stay on top of all the breaking news across the NBA. Woj was completely burned out and needed to find some balance in his life. He told his bosses at ESPN he probably could have gutted it out for one more season. But, as you said, when the opportunity to help out his alma mater as the GM of the St. Bonaventure men's basketball team presented itself, he realized that it excited him in a way that breaking NBA news no longer did. You're right, Anthony. There was no one in the business quite like him, and no disrespect to Shams Charania, who's the Athletics NBA insider, but Woj was the truth. 2 capital T's in that. He was all about getting it right, not just getting it first, a product of his background as an award-winning general sports columnist and reporter for the Bergen Record, New Jersey. Not just getting it first. And that was something we on the show have talked about. His NFL counterpart, Adam Schefter, has occasionally forgotten about that last part. In the statement that Woj put out after informing his bosses at ESPN of his decision, there was a passage that stuck with me. And here's the quote. Time isn't in endless supply, and I want to spend mine in ways that are personally meaningful. End quote. That's a rule of life we should all aspire to. Woj, enjoy your next chapter, man. The 3 of us here and a generation of NBA fans will miss you.
He's only like 55, 56 years old, too. So he's got a lot of life ahead of him in the sports world. We'll see where it takes him as he embarks the new chapter of his life. Also, guys, before we get into a lot more baseball, how can you not talk about what Shohei Ohtani yesterday, becoming the founder, getting the incorporation papers ready or whatever papers you need of the 50-50 club. That's 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases. First ever person to do it.
Incorporate in Delaware like every other LLC does?
He just incorporated in Florida where they seemingly somehow have a team.
Gotcha. No state income tax. Gotcha.
No state income tax. That always works out the best. And Jay, Ohtani did it against the Marlins with one of the best hitting lines we've ever seen in a situation like that. 6 for 6, 3 home runs, and the first person in 8 years to go for double-digit RBIs with 10. Wow.
Yeah, I ran the numbers. In becoming the first player in Major League Baseball history with 50 homers and 50 stolen bases in the same season would be ridiculous enough, especially since his previous high for stolen bases was 26 in 2021. But, as the rabbi alluded to, the way Ohtani reached the 50-50 club was just simply crazy. As you said, 6 for 6, 3 homers, throw in 2 doubles, 5 extra base hits, and 2 stolen bases, 5 extra base hits, 10 RBI. I completely agree with Ohtani's teammate Gavin Lux, who said afterwards, quote, that has to be the greatest baseball game of all time. It has to be. The history of what he did in that game kind of bears that out. No player in baseball history had a game where he hit 3 homers and had multiple stolen bases until Ohtani did it on Thursday. The previous mark for total bases in a single game by a player who also had multiple stolen bases was 11. Ohtani had 17 total bases Thursday night. No player since at least 1901 had a game where he had at least 5 hits, multiple homers, and multiple stolen bases. And according to OptaStats, no player since 1920 has ever had a 10 RBI day, a 6 hit day, a 5 extra base hit day, a 3 home run day, and a multi-stolen base day within their entire career. Ohtani did all of that in a single Thursday afternoon en route to a 20-4 thrashing of the Marlins by the Dodgers, which clinched their playoff spot. Oh, and guys, you want to laugh? Had Ohtani not gotten thrown out trying to stretch a double into a triple in his third at bat, he'd have also hit for his second career cycle. There is a reason the Athletics' Jason Stark calls him the greatest show, no W, on earth, and others call him a unicorn. No disrespect to my colleague or the Met fans in my family and the season that Lindor is having, but any discussion about the 2024 National League MVP is now officially and unequivocally closed.
It was over a long time ago, by the way. I don't care if he's a part-time player or not, but that's another discussion for a whole nother day, Anthony.
Yeah, look, I got the Yankee game on, and the Yes Network's actually got his stats out. He was total bases shy of the MLB record, who was held by another former Dodger, Sean Green, who posted his congratulations yesterday afternoon.
Yep, 19 in 2001.
Like I said, I don't like. There's no words to describe what Shohei Ohtani did yesterday. But more importantly, we forget that he's not pitching this year because he had surgery. So he's pretty much been exclusively at DH. But the fact that he became a better hitter and just seemed like a more overall player, despite the fact that he's not playing the field in any capacity this season, it's just incredible. I mean, think about this. What 2 weeks removed from him reaching the 40-40 club. And now he's the first guy to be part of the 50-50 club. That was probably the coldest take I've ever seen. Someone posted on Twitter, and it was Shohei Ohtani's scout report. And it basically said, I don't know who the hell this scout is. I hope he has good retirement benefits, because he literally wrote that it's like a high schooler trying to hit MLB pitching. I was like, yeah. I would love to have a high school on my team right now. Look, I love what Francisco Lindor has done this season. He has clearly been a catalyst in Mets getting back to the playoff chase. But Shohei Ohtani, the season he is having is a historic season that we're going to be talking about for years to come. And by the way, Rabbi, I say this once, I say it 1,000 times. When you make the cover of a video game, good things happen to you. By the way, cover this up when you see SHO, the show, baby. So I'm just going to put that out there. Hey, look, Christopher kept your side, because that's a man, James. We'll talk about that on another show. But yeah, there's not much more I can say that, Jay, you haven't said, and that pretty much everyone, even including Billie Jean King herself, has said this has just been one of the greatest performances that we have seen in modern baseball history, and from an amazing ball player who, just when we think we've seen everything out of him, we see more. And by the way, he's playing in his first postseason of his professional career, so that should be really something to tune in for as far as the Dodgers and baseball fans in general is concerned.
By the way, his first ever 3 home run game, by the way. I forgot to mention that in all of this. So what an insane season. It will be finally a treat to see the best player of this era currently finally making a postseason appearance. That'll happen in a few weeks. Speaking of, let's start on the hunt for October with the locals and the Yankees. They're only 30-24 after the All-Star break, which seems like a little bit of a pedestrian number, but they're still 3.5.
That's literally the definition of pedestrian, Rabbi.
It really is. It is a pedestrian number. But then when you think about it, with the start that they got to, this is where they are now. The Yankees are 3.5 games ahead of the Baltimore Orioles for the AL East lead, and that could keep the Yankees out of the wild card best-of-3 series. I don't care. I never want to see that series as long as I live. I don't give a damn about momentum and anything else. Also, the Yankees find themselves currently a half a game over the Cleveland Guardians for the best record in the AL. That's going to probably be tied in about a few minutes. Well, the Yankees clinched their 59th postseason trip on Wednesday. Gents, that's more postseason trips than years that we've been alive. So this team has some roster decisions to make. Let's start on the hitting front. Jay, what hitter do you say is playing for a roster spot in the second season over these last few weeks?
Rabbi, and the 30-24 is why you bank wins in April when you can.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
There you go. I mean, it's Alex Verdugo. I mean, the call-up of the Martian made this the captain obvious choice. Jason Dominguez is most likely the Yankees starting left fielder next season, but for the remainder of this season, he'll be splitting time with Alex Verdugo to see who makes the postseason roster as the starting left fielder. Yes, granted, Dominguez will get days in center field alongside him when Judge DHs, but that's not going to happen in the playoffs. It's highly possible that both will make the playoff roster. As good as Trent Grisham is with the leather, and he's flashed it plenty this season, it's hard to justify putting a guy who can't get off the interstate or above the Mendoza line out there in October. Grisham is hitting 186 with an OPS of 88 and a weighted runs created plus of 90, especially as Aaron Judge is likely to play every game in center field in the postseason. So the question is more about whether Verdugo is more of a starter or a spectator. Now, Verdugo has struggled with the bat for most of this season. Coming into the just completed series with Seattle, his weighted runs created plus was 86 overall. His OPS plus was 85. That basically means he's about 15% worse than the average major league hitter. Through this month, though this month has been his best so far, coming into the series, he was hitting 290, 357, 368 slash line, 726 OPS with a home run, 4 RBI, 313 on batting average with balls in play, and a 111 weighted runs created across 11 games in this month prior to going 1-for-9 in the series Mariners. But the thing that has been talked about most in terms of why manager Aaron Boone still believes in him, besides what he's meant to team chemistry, which is not something to gloss over, especially in the postseason, is his defense. Now, coming into the weekend series with the A's, which starts tonight, his outs above average, 6th among all qualified Major League Baseball left fielders. His defensive runs saved, 3rd among all qualified left fielders, and his ultimate zone rating is 2nd among all qualified baseball left fielders. Add to that, the fact that the Martian hasn't exactly set the Milky Way on fire since his call-up, hitting below the Mendoza line with a slash line of just 148, 281, 259. That's a 541 OPS, a 55 OPS plus, 45% below the major league average, and a weighted runs created of 63. And he's also had his adventures in the outfield, including one in the series finale against Seattle. As much as Yankee fans raged on WFAN after that Dominguez wasn't called up promptly on September 1st, the Yankees chose to wait until the end of the AAA season ended so the kid could play every day for as long as possible. That was always the plan. These last 11 games ahead of the playoffs are somewhat of an audition to see if he truly deserves to start in left field over Verdugo, who has a decent amount of postseason experience from his time in Boston, 11 games in 2021, and he produced with a 310, 383, 452 slash line, and 835 OPS, a homer, 6 RBI, and 5 runs scored as the Red Sox made it all the way to the ALCS. At the end of the day, and as I said at the top, I think both Verdugo and Dominguez will make the postseason roster, but in the high pressure that is not just October baseball, but October baseball in the Bronx, I can see Verdugo's defense and postseason experience giving the edge, at least to start that first series, whether it's the AL wildcard or the division series.
So fun fact, let's marry the two things that we just talked about together. Shohei Ohtani, in that game that we just talked about, had a 0.7 F-WAR in one specific game. Alex Verdugo's 143 games this season have produced a 0.6 F-WAR, which is kind of insane. But again, there's other things that he brings to the table. And he's also going to have, I think he only is 2 groundouts away from the most groundouts to the right side in a single season.
Wow.
In the era of the
way to get some niche next-gen stats in there, partner.
Yeah, that's about 9 years, by the way, only affects, but that's an insane amount of hitting that he needs to kind of work on a little bit. I agree. I see a platoon going the whole entire way this postseason, and I almost see a fact where I think Dominguez might start the game and Verdugo might finish it, because I feel like that might be the best way to do it, but that's just my opinion. So
that's possible. And, you know, you cited the Fangraphs WAR. Baseball References WAR has Verdugo at 0.9. But, you know, there's some distinct, there's a wee
you
bit
say you say tomato, I say tomato, you say 0.7, I say 0.9.
We'll split the difference and call it 0.8, because there are some slight differences in how both statistical platforms calculate wins above replacement.
Well, Anthony, let's call the whole thing off about wins above replacement, and let's talk about what pitcher needs to produce going into the postseason.
By the way, By the way, before I start, congratulations on season number 33 for the Yankees of not having a losing city season.
Yep.
Since 1992, they have finished 500 or better. And no, it's in 33 consecutive seasons. So for all the people that complain about the front office and Brian Cashman, yeah, whatever. This is called consistency, all right? This is called building a team that can compete and win year after year. And
All having a chance every year.
yeah, it's all about giving yourself an opportunity. And
As
speaking of
much as,
opportunity,
as much as Steeler fans like to brag about Mike Tomlin never having a losing season, he ain't got nothing on the Yankees.
no. And speaking of opportunity, Lester Cortez is giving himself every opportunity to try to get onto that postseason rotation. Keep in mind, it was just a few weeks ago that he was moved to the bullpen and clearly voiced his dissatisfaction with that. And maybe Aaron Boone may have sparked him a little bit because he only had one really bad outing. That was against St. Louis a little over a month ago when he was knocked out early. But outside of that, he has been pitched really well. In a game against Chicago in relief, he came in and pitched very well. But look at his last two starts against the Red Sox. Give me just a second because my laptop is acting a fool. But against the Red Sox, struck out nine hitters in just five innings. And it was a great confidence builder then. And of course, a couple of nights ago in Seattle, pitched six scoreless innings and helping the Yankees clinch a playoff spot. The deal with Cortez is he has the unique ability to be able to be a starter and come out of the bullpen. Obviously, in Chicago, that was his first bullpen relief appearance since 2021. He has that experience, but he also has postseason experience. 2 years ago, he made 3 postseason starts for the Yankees, including the deciding Game 5 in that division series win against Cleveland when he went 5 innings and got the decision in that game. But Aaron Boone, this is what you call a great dilemma. He has 6 starters that he can basically go to. He has Clark Schmidt, he has Luis Gil, Carlos Rondon, Marcus Stroman, Cortez. Only Garrett Cole is pretty much the absolute shoe-in lock to make the postseason. He's a game 1 starter, regardless of how you go that route. But then you have to, but what Aaron Boone is, you have to think about postseason experience, and that's where Cortez kind of gets the nod on some of his other his teammates. You know, they got Clark Schmidt and Gill. They've been 2 really good young starters, particularly when the Yankees got to that hot start early in the season. They were back up the wins. They were part of the pitching rotation that had got to the Yankees off to that tour start. And Cortez was the guy who picked up the front end of pitching staff when Garrett Cole was on the disabled list. So you have that to factor in, but also keep this in mind too. With Cortez, if you count his start from Wednesday night, he's now pitched to 1.58 ERA over his last 6 outings. And of course, that's including the relief appearance in Chicago. And Cortez start on Wednesday was his 4th scoreless appearance in his last 7 games. So Lester Cortez has really been able to pick it up in the first half. He had been a little inconsistent, a little streaky up and down. Remember, and coming off an injury-plagued 2023 campaign, maybe he's starting to revert back to the Lester Cortez that was the All-Star in 2022 and did get the ball with the season on the line in the Bronx against Cleveland. So I can see Cortez being a Game 2 or maybe a Game 3 starter in the division series, but right now he's at least really built himself a strong resume with at least 1 more start before the end of the season.
And
and Anthony, just to clarify, he may not have been crazy about the idea when it was originally broached to him. I mean, no starter ever is. But I think the thing that made it more palatable is Nestor's always been a team guy. He'll do whatever is needed for the team to win. And moving him to the bullpen to follow Clark Schmidt in Schmidt's first start back, that the plan was always going to be a plan because Schmidt was on a pitch count. It wasn't going to go past 75. The Yankees were hoping he could get that final out on that 75th pitch, complete the 5th inning, and get him the win. So it was always the plan for Cortez to come in behind him and finish out the game, but he was always going to return to the rotation in time for his start against Boston. So I think that his initial reaction may have been, but once the plan was laid out, he seemed to be a lot more comfortable with it, knowing this backing, going to the bullpen behind Schmidt was just for that particular start.
Yeah,
But
and also, and also you brought that up. Keep in mind, the postseason rotation gets shorter anyway, so you kind of want a starter who can come in the worst case scenario and be a guy who can get innings, at least get to the bullpen in the worst case scenario. Cortez, because of his experience, seems like the guy who's best set up for that in the event that Aaron Boone decides to go in another direction.
Yeah, and if he wants to go right-hander in that situation, remember, Schmidt started off as a reliever, a long reliever to his, multi-inning reliever. So he's got plenty of options. But yeah, I think Cortez, I agree with you. And I think Cortez has made a very strong case that he should be in that, on that staff coming into October.
Plus, there's a lot of bullpen mix and match that I think this team is definitely going to do, because that's been the overlying theme of this season. Is if you had to pick out of the 3 points, what is the weakest point? I would say that probably is number one, although the hitting had taken a huge dump, especially especially in the June and July months. But I think that's been the one inconsistent. And I think bringing at least a starter or two to be a long guy out of the bullpen, or maybe even a 7th or 8th inning guy, might help out very, very well. Okay. So the Orioles series is coming up. That is next week. That is always going to be the series that we were going to be talking about. Mm-hmm. It is a 3.5 game lead now that the Yankees have over the Orioles, and the Yankees have not had the greatest of records this year versus the Orioles, and have had some bad games against the Orioles. That game right before the All-Star break kind of probably being the biggest case. But this has not been the greatest year. This has not been the greatest run for the Orioles. They have won their last 2. They did win tonight, by the way, against a Tigers team who was looking to make a run of themselves, hitting 5 home runs. But this team is 28-30 since the All-Star game. And they were looking for their first AL East crowd, back-to-back crowds in 73 and 74. And you're looking at a team that has struggled. Adley Rutschman has a stat line of 201, 285, 302 since the break. That's not good. And it's actually it's a lower stat line than Jackson Holliday has, who's had his troubles going in and out this year of the main club. Corbin Burns did not have a great August, 21 runs in 25 innings. He's been consistent, though, through the whole way. They ranked 21st in ERA since the break. Pitchers have been there's been no depth on this team. Probably Zach Eflin has been the best of their pitchers right now, and their best trade deadline acquisition, 2.22 and 7 starts. He'll pitch the Tuesday game in the series coming up. And they just DFA'd Craig Kimbrell. I know Sir Anthony Dominguez took over the closer role for the Orioles since they got him post All-Star break. But this is not the same Orioles team. This is an Orioles team that was kind of all roses coming up into the playoffs last year, and then they got swept. So this could be a wake-up call for them, but this series is still important. And if the Yankees don't take care of business in Oakland this weekend, at least winning 2 of 3, this could be a series that the Yankees would still possibly have to win to maintain a possible spot on top of the AL East. Yep. There's a lot of ways this series can go. You have some, I know the pitching probables for the first 2 games. Cortez is going to start the game on the 25th. Stroman against Dean Kremer on the first game on the 24th. Let's see what happens. Yankee Stadium will be buzzing in that final week. Yeah. They will have the Pirates to end the season, so that'll be a little bit better of a fallback if they need to bank wins in that final 3 games. Yankees and Orioles have been 2 good rivals throughout the season. Little flat coming into the end of the year, but a lot of these races at the top of the division have been a little flat coming into the end of the year. But the Yankees still keeping the momentum, but that's the series I think I would like to see watch as this final week goes on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, let's move on to the Mets, who's 36-22 since the All-Star break and 13-5 in the month of September. That is including their loss tonight. I told Anthony this stat, and this is insane. Although, because I wrote this stat, I probably jinxed them tonight. Since August 24th, coming into tonight, starters for the Mets had lost just one game. Now it's two. But that's insane to know the fact that you're getting 6 to 7 days. Come on, David Peterson has one bad game, and you put your head in it. That's just an insane stat to me. That they've been in pretty much every game since that point. Tonight was probably their biggest blowout since probably that time of August 24th. They are 2 games up on the Braves for a wild card spot. That still holds true after tonight. And as of now, they are a half a game behind the Diamondbacks for the second wild card. That could probably be going down to 1. So if the Mets are playing baseball in 2 weeks, they have some decisions to make. And hell, these players are just important to this team right now. Jay, same question to you. Hit her under the microscope, and that could get them into a bigger postseason role.
We all know that the Mets would prefer to have the hitter I got in mind is Tyrone Taylor, who's been playing the bulk of the games in right field of late. We all know that the Mets would prefer to have the 2022 version of Starling Marte locked in as their starting right fielder. That guy had a 292, 347, 468 slash line with an 814 OPS and a 134 weighted runs created plus, with 16 homers, 18 steals, 76 runs scored, and 63 RBI in just 118 games across 505 plate appearances and 466 at bats, and made the NL All-Star team and also had some down-ballot MVP votes. But that guy just cannot stay healthy. He was on the IL from June 23 until August 18, which required the Mets to find players to fill the hole in right field. And one outfielder who has done enough to warrant at least a chance at a postseason outfield roster spot is Taylor, especially since Marte's offense, his primary skill set, has been underwhelming in the 20 games he's played since coming off the IL. 0 homers, 10 RBI, and a slash line of just 265, 323, 38. OPS at just 658. And 2, with Jose Quintana making a case to get at least one postseason start, and the Mets intentionally putting their best gloves on the field when he pitches, Taylor would seem to have a ready-made role. Now, look, we know Taylor can run down anything that stays in the park. He's made some highlight reel catches, including one against the wall in the 7th inning to take extra bases away from Andre Chaparro in Quintana's most recent start. But his Fangraphs advanced defense metrics are pretty solid. His outs above average, solid, +4 overall across all 3 outfield positions. He's played 119 innings in left, 238 in center, and 326 in right. And he's +3 specifically in right field. His ultimate zone rating, 2.7 overall, 1.9 in right. His defensive runs saved is +8 overall and 8 overall in right. He'd be top 5 among National League right fielders in defensive runs saved, top 10 in outs above average, and top 20 in UZR if he actually had enough innings to qualify. Now, his numbers at the plate don't scream all-star, but they're comparable with what the Mets are and are not getting from Marte. Taylor has a 247, 297, 412 slash line. It's a 709 OPS with 7 homers, 34 RBI, 45 runs scored, 10 steals. His OPS plus 101, his weighted runs created plus 100. So he's literally at the major league average. His splits are better against right-handed pitching, considering he's a right-handed hitter. 253, 301, 423 slash line. It's a 724 OPS. 5 of his 7 home runs, 21 of his 31 extra base hits in 84 games across 210 plate appearances and 149 at bats. And he's been his best at the plate in September as the Mets are looking to secure a wild card spot. So far in the month, not counting tonight, 320, 393, 600 slash line. It's a 993 OPS. 5 of his 8 hits going for extra bases across 13 games, 7 starts, 28 plate appearances, and 25 at bats. Look, Marte overall has put up a 275, 326, 399 slash line with a 726 OPS. His OPS plus is 107, as is his weighted runs creative plus. So not much better than Taylor. 7 homers, 40 RBI, 16 steals, 42 runs scored. But down the stretch here in September, in 11 games and across 10 starts, he has just a 286, 381, 371 slash line. That's just a 752 OPS. No homers, 9 RBI, 2 steals, 2 run scores, and only 2 extra base hits. If a guy who is counted on to provide some pop from a corner outfield spot doesn't seem to be able to do so, you might as well play the guy who has comparable numbers at the plate and is definitively better in the field.
Yeah. It'd be very interesting to see. One thing I've noticed about the Mets this year is not a lot of teams have the depth that the Mets have all of a sudden really gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they can have an injury, like the Francisco Lindor injury currently. He's been out for the last 6 games. And be able to still kind of be the same team. They scored 10 runs in 3 consecutive games without him. There's a reason why. They have lineup power all over the lineup. So we'll see what happens, but there's a lot of good ways to go with the hitting direction. Anthony, same way with the pitching. Which player you have under the microscope for the final 9 games of the season?
Well, David Peterson, we figured that he would have to step up big time for the Mets if they were going to turn around. But boy, I don't think anyone in their wildest imagination thought Peterson would go 9-3, including tonight, and basically go several starts with an ERA under either 2 or less. Tonight against Philadelphia was the first time he allowed more than 2 runs in his last several starts. So that just tell you how good he's been. And against the same Philly team just a little over a week ago, he held him to 1 run over 7 innings. So Peterson's been spectacular. 93 ERA under 3. When you and go back to September 2nd, which by the way he told 29 that night, a career high 11 strikeouts in 6 innings against the Boston Red Sox to get that decision. When you look at David Peterson and his 4 seasons with the Mets, one thing that's been certain is that he's been inconsistent. Like, he has shown flashes that he could be a really good starter, and there are times where things just go from bad to worse. Like tonight against Philadelphia, you can kind of see that the Phillies seeing him several times, obviously through the lineup in under a week. You can kind of see that the Phillies have finally caught up to Peterson, and the contact and everything was starting to get harder and harder. It's like I can see where him being taken out of the game was a smart decision. It's just unfortunate the wheels fell off as soon as he left the game. But outside of that, last year his ERA was under 5, was over 5. He had been bounced back and forth between the bigs and the minor leagues. This year, after having off-season hip surgery, clearly he's been a much better pitcher. One thing that has changed is the fact that he's had more control. He's not trying to he's not trying to paint the corners at every at bat. But more importantly, he's reduced a lot more ground ball outs. He's using the sinker a lot more, and that's been a benefit to his. Definitely been a benefit. But here's the thing too with the Mets, and when you have so much pitching, you also have a lot of decisions to make. If the Mets can get into the postseason, think about this: they're a wild card team. They're going to be in the best of 3, regardless of what happens. The Mets already have 2 lefties in the rotation in Sean Manaea and Jose Quintana. You got to think that both of those guys would be almost a lock to be in the rotation unless something drastically happens. However, for David Peterson, he is definitely his strong second half. At least give the Mets some kind of assurance for next season, because the Mets do have a number of starting pitchers that are going to be free agents like Manaea, like Quintana, and like Luis Severino. That he's a guy that can pencil in, has a starting rotation guy for next season. Even more so with Christian Scott needed Tommy John surgery and will miss the entire 2025 campaign. So for David Peterson, he's giving the Mets something to look forward to for next season. But he's got one more start because he is lined up to pitch the finale in Atlanta next weekend, next Wednesday, actually. And that is pretty much going to determine the final wildcard spot, depending on if the Mets are 1 game up or even 2 games up going into that series. Peterson he's been very stellar. He has pitched a lot more to contact. Maybe tonight didn't work out so well against a good Phillies lineup,
A lot of
but he is
contacts.
yeah, a lot of contact. But yeah, Peterson is the guy that if any day he has to continue what he's been doing since the All-Star break. He's 4-2 since the start of July, so he has been really good. And the Mets playoff hopes may actually rest on the left arm of David Peterson if it comes down to needing to take 2 out of 3 from Atlanta, and he is the guy in the rubber match.
By the way, that finale is Thursday. I believe it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday series. I made a
Oh,
mistake
it's
before.
Thursday. Yeah,
They only have
Thursday,
8
yeah.
games left after tonight, not 9.
Sorry, because Monday's the off day.
Yeah, Monday's the off day. It gets confusing. Okay. Anthony, I apologize. I know the words that I wrote in the script kind of doomed them tonight, so I'm going to say some nice words again about the Mets going into the series.
Broadcaster jinx.
That's fine. That's why I'm acknowledging that this could be a broadcaster jinx, but I'm just stating facts in all of this stuff. Let's talk about that Braves series, which would be Tuesday through Thursday. I just want to bring up a couple of things about the Braves. Number one, they've been injured in a lot of different places, mostly with Ozzy Albies, who had a very good run. We talked about how Francisco Lindor was going to be the main competitor for Shohei Ohtani. There was a while where Ozzy Albies was going to be the main competitor for a Shohei Ohtani MVP run. He injured his left wrist on July 21st, returned to the lineup tonight against Miami, but because that wrist is still bothering him, he's only going to be a right-handed batter for the time being. Fortunately, went 0 for 4 tonight in that situation, in a game that they lost to against the Florida Marlins 4-3. Big problem out there because they can't lose too many more games, especially against teams like that. Number two, the Braves, who have had all of these injuries. Yes, they had a 6-game losing streak in the middle of August, but since then, since Monday, August 12th, they haven't lost a series since then. They've tied a few series. They tied the Dodgers series last week, and they split that 2-2. But they haven't lost a series straight up since August 12th, and everybody's been winning around them, especially the Mets. So that has just made every single loss that they've had, like this loss against the Marlins tonight, a loss against the Reds last week, a loss against the Nationals earlier last week as well. Those one losses come back to haunt them because in a race that we thought was only going to need 85 to 86 wins to get yourself that final wildcard spot, you're going to need 91 to 92 now all of a sudden. Just remember, I believe the Arizona Diamondbacks last year made the 6th spot of the NL wildcard at 84 and 78. And you're going to be at least 5 to 6 games better than that to do that this year. And one thing I do have to mention, and this is probably the one thing that gives Atlanta fans hope in the Braves and gives the Met fans PTSD, 2 years ago comes immediately back to mind. Needing just one game to keep pace in the division and have control of their own destiny in their hands. The Mets got swept in the second to last game of the second to last series of the season last 2 years ago. They're in that situation again, but they're in a much better situation. They're a younger team. They're a team with less expectations on them. They're not happy to be their team. I think all Met fans want to see their team get as far as possible, but they know that there's going to be lower stakes on them this time around, and so that could make for a fun series. The season series is tied 5-5. Whoever wins this series is most likely going to be that second or third wild card, most guaranteed.
Yeah, you think back to 2 years ago, they finished the same record, but that series Atlanta against what pretty much gave the Braves a 10-9 regular season win advantage because they won the tiebreaker, and the Braves won the division winner, and the Mets were a wild card team, and obviously the Mets losing to the Padres in that wild card series, it made all the difference. I mean, and in all 3 games, the Mets led in those games, but it was one of those being the Met moments where every little bounce went against the Mets, even like the littlest things happen. And now you're kind of seeing a bit of a roller coaster because the Braves have lost 3 games this week, including tonight, against two really bad teams.
But they
And
haven't lost
Cincinnati,
consistently
they
against
haven't
them,
lost
though. That's the
consistent.
thing. It's just these 1 or 2
Yeah,
bad games that have cost them.
yeah, but sometimes it's the timing of the losses. I mean, you think
Yeah.
about this: the Mets getting blown out in Philly opened the door up for the Braves to gain ground, and they can't take advantage of it. And earlier this week, when the Mets dropped the final 2 games in Philadelphia, that the Braves had an opportunity to they were actually a game up in the wild card and a chance to extend that lead, and the Dodgers destroyed them in back-to-back games. So sometimes it's just the timing of the losses that could be just as effective as losing the series. And for the Braves, it has been that untimely loss that has kind of tripped them up a little bit.
One
To
thing
borrow,
that
go ahead. Okay, I'm just going to inject
go
one.
ahead and your thing. Go do your thing. I got one more thing.
To borrow a phrase that we've heard bandied about both over the years when they're figuring out resumes from March Madness, and which is now bled into college football. It's not only who you play, it's also when you play them.
One thing that I noticed about the Mets is, remember, it was a long time ago. This was before Grimace, but this was May 11th, and the Mets were playing the Braves. I think it was a game you were at, Anthony, where the Mets were no hit going into the ninth inning, and JD Martinez literally broke up that no hitter and saved the Mets from. This is probably their most embarrassing time during the year because they were just getting blown out in that homestand, and it just shows that the Mets have had to fight this whole entire year, and just little things like that, little things like Grimace, the hot Tua girl, and then immediately turning everything around. Just little things that have been able to springboard
OMG.
the Mets and OMG, absolutely. So that's one of the things about the Mets. It's been a very interesting season where it's happened.
Players only mean after the Dodgers embarrassed them at home. I mean, that players only media by that was spearheaded by Francisco Lindor is something that's been overlooked with the Grimace and, like you said, the hot Tui girl.
The hot girl, yeah.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of the Mets season's been one hell of a roller coaster, to say the least. And we see the final 6 games. It's not a coincidence that for the roller coasters that the Mets has had, that this final week is going to be just as much an emotional roller coaster, whether it's watching the Mets or even scoreboard watching.
Shout out by the way to the Mets PR team as well, and the Mets stadium team for putting up the Stringer Bell. Want to give you the word that we're back up being after the series against the Orioles as well. I forgot to mention that. I was going to mention the Hawks too. We're going to mention.
Yeah, and Anthony, you talk about the roller coaster ride, but if you think about it, what's been playing through my head, as we've kind of gotten to this point and the road they've taken to get here, I hearken back to something that we talked about either on our spring training show or when we, our baseball season tip-off show. The goal of the Mets this year, they knew they weren't going to be World Series contenders, but their goal was to be competitive and be playing meaningful games in September with a shot at getting a wild card. Here they are.
And anything can happen, especially I think in these playoffs this year. So we'll think about that. But there is other races going on. Sure, the races for the division is what the fabric of old school Americana is about, and we'll talk about a couple of them in this segment. But don't forget about the new school wild cards too. There are now 3 per league. Sorry to mansplain you that, but I just wanted to mention that. And note, in the 2 years of this new 3 wild card format, there have been 8 series won by one of those wild card teams in either the DS, the Championship Series, or ultimately the World Series. Mm-hmm. So when we go through these races, keep that in mind. Anthony, let's start out at the AL, where it's not Detroit versus everybody, but Detroit versus 1 or 2 cities in particular, like Kansas City and Minnesota.
Yeah, let's flash back to last month, August 18th, where the Minnesota Twins blew a 4-0 lead to the Texas Rangers in a loss. Now, keep that in mind. They were up as much as 5.5 games and comfortably in the playoff spot. A month later, and they are they when they lose when they go 10-20 over the next month. And meanwhile, the Detroit Tigers go on MLB best 20-9 in that same span. You have now two teams tied for the final wild card spot. Oh, and by the way, Kansas City's late season stumble in the last few days has brought them somewhat back down to the pack as well. But here's the thing with the Minnesota, and I saw with the Twins, because it's been a tale of two different teams headed in literally polar opposite directions. The Twins have spoken of losing 20 of the last 30 games, but look at the record against teams that are 500 or better. They're almost they're winless against the Yankees this season. And they said losing 3 out of 4 to the Guardians. They're now just 3-11 against the Guardians this season. They're 0-3 against the Braves. And 0-3 against the Baltimore Orioles. They lost series to the Dodgers, the Brewers, the Mets, and the Padres, respectively. They are a combined 38-55 against teams currently above 500. Oh, and by the way, they're 12-1 against the Chicago White Sox. Unfortunately, they can't play the White Sox every game. I know
that's the motto of the AL. That's the motto of the AL Central. Unfortunately, we can't play the White Sox every game.
Motto of the entire American League.
But part of the Twins' problem is the fact that they finally got a healthy Royce Lewis, Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa in the lineup, but the plug and play start rotation along with middle relief has been Achilles heel, and it's led to some pretty heartbreaking game losses, particularly losing 3 out of 4 to the Guardians. And tonight, last I checked, they were tied in extra innings with the Boston Red Sox going into the 11th inning. Now, on the flip side, the Detroit Tigers going 29 in that span has a run differential of plus 44 in that same span. And erasing
plus 62, by the way, since August 11th.
So that's it's even going further back. But then you think about this too. They've been led by Cy Young favorite Tyler Skubal, who's been since the All-Star break, 6-1, 2.67 ERA, 74 strikeouts across 67 innings. And Parker Meadows has been kind of like the spearheading the offensive resurgence in that time as well, batting just close to 300 in that span. But you look at the final, and I just had the last schedule, the final few games. For Minnesota, give me just a second. The Twins, by the way, the Twins had the tiebreaker in the case of a tie. So it's essentially right now, if the Twins can win, there'll be a game up, but it'd be basically like a 2-game lead when you factor in the tiebreaker. For the Tigers, they end the season obviously against Baltimore this weekend, against Tampa Bay. Oh, and by the way, they played the White Sox the last 3 games of the season. So someone had to get the log in and the law strong in his rotation. Meanwhile, the Twins, for their troubles, look at the Twins schedule. They get the Red Sox the rest of this weekend, but they'll close at home against Miami. And by the way, if you're a Yankee fan and the division is still not decided, they play the Orioles to end the season. So yes, this should be a very compelling race down the stretch, and also with the Kansas City Royals kind of coming back down because they're only 2 games up and nil, and for the second wild card spot, you basically got 3 teams in the same division fighting for 2 wild card spots. So they'll fasten your seatbelts. But the Twins, like I said, it has been a tale of polar opposites since August 18th.
Yep.
Yeah, and by the way, the Royals also have that same tiebreaker against the Tigers if it comes down to that. Professor Kaplan,
yes, sir.
Give us a little lesson on what's going on with the rest of the NL West, the Padres and Diamondbacks included, please.
Yes, sir. So, last night's game for the ages by the unicorn known as Shohei Ohtani clinched a postseason berth for the Dodgers. They'll now turn their attention to clinching the NL West for the 11th time in the last 12 seasons. Their magic number to do so is down to 6. They have a 4-game lead on the Padres with 9 games left coming into tonight's action, and each team has 1 more series before they face each other again. LA starts a 3-game home set with the 94-loss Rockies. San Diego starts one with the aforementioned 117 loss White Sox. The final installment of the I-5 series takes place next week as the Pods come north to visit the tenants of Chavez Ravine Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The division could be decided by the time this three-game series is over, but if not, LA has the on-paper edge as they end the season with 3 in Colorado, while San Diego ends it with 3 in Arizona against the Diamondbacks team looking to overtake them for the AL's top wildcard spot. The D-backs currently sit 2 games behind the Padres in that race. The Dodgers have struggled down the stretch. They're only 9-8 in September coming into tonight after a 19-8 August, which was their best month of the season, largely due to injuries, mostly to their pitching staff. And they're only 3-7 against the Padres, who have been playing ball at a 685 clip since the All-Star break. That is a 111 win pace. And head into that series with the White Sox having won 5 of the last 6, 3 by shutout. So having 6 games against the Rockies bookend the 3 with the Padres does give LA a larger margin for error than San Diego has in terms of the division title, which puts a bit of added pressure on San Diego to do no worse than take 2 of 3 from the White Sox before facing Arizona, who they've split the season series with so far, 5 wins apiece. Taking 2 of 3 from Los Angeles next week could immensely improve their chances of winning the division, though if the teams finish with the same record, San Diego will win the NL West by way of a tiebreaker. However, it's more likely that the Padres' path to the postseason goes through the wild card, as their magic number to clinch at least a place at the NL's postseason table is down to 5. Though at the moment, Arizona holds the tiebreaker against the Padres for the NL's top wildcard spot, which could come into play when the 2 teams meet in that final regular season series. The final 10 days of the regular season are going to be very interesting across the entire National League West, to be sure.
Okay, spoiler alert, the final 10 days across the American League West are not going to be as exciting, but it does have worth a mention just to note what's happening over there. Yeah, there's not too many races in this old MLB. We'll give the Seattle-Houston race a shout out, even though it is down to 4 games. It is down to 4 games now, or 4.5 games, as Seattle's at 79-75. Houston's at 83-70. They do play a 3-game series this week in Houston. But turn out the lights. The party is pretty much almost over for this one. The Astros got off to a 12-24 start, but then the Astros just Astroed the rest of the season. 3rd in batting average, but what's really been impressive is the pitching without really any major contribution from Justin Verlander, who hitters are hitting .320 against since he's come back from injury. It's just rinse, repeat, and just do what you've usually done. They are a team that really has a lot of good pitchers on there. Rodel Blanco is going to be a key player in the postseason. 2.88 ERA, 1.09 ERA. There is just some good names out there. Yusei Kikuchi, a big name out there. He's had a very good run for the Astros so far. His ERA with the team is 3. You have a lineup. You have Taylor Scott in that same lineup as well. You have just a very good lineup of pitchers, and really the old guard is doing very little for the Astros right now. They're going to be a completely different team when we most likely will see them in the postseason. However, even though they're going to probably clinch their 7th division title in 8 years. Yeah, that 8-year run is still continuing. Remember, it's technically 7 straight because I'm not counting that COVID season as anything that would go into that little record book. So it's really 7 full seasons in a row that they've won the AL West. They're going to have to play a 3-game series. And any of these wild card series, especially as the favorite, is not something I want to do unless it's Minnesota. And we know Minnesota doesn't beat anybody with a winning record. In that case, you could just pencil in Houston for either a series against Baltimore, against the Yankees, Baltimore, or Cleveland. You could write that in Seth Davis Sharpie. But otherwise, I would just say that it's not great what's happened to Seattle. They just struggled hitting. They have they have the hitting essentially of the Chicago White Sox and the pitching of his Cy Young of a team that can make the World Series. But you got to do both. The Mariners just were never able to get it really going this year hitting-wise. They just are going to have a lot of questions going into this offseason, most likely, unless they can pull a miracle in this final week and change. All right, guys, let's move on to local football and the gridiron. We'll start with Big Blue. 2024 saw some pretty bad signs for Big Blue because just like week 1 in 2023, the New York Giants got their butts whooped in week 1. Just like week 2 in 2023, the Giants were in a well, I know they came back from a lot against Arizona, but it was a nip and tuck game on the road that ended in the last second field goal. Similarities unfortunately end there, folks. The 3 TDs for the Giants did not equal the 7 field goals for the Washington Commanders. And when you don't have a kicker, that's why the math doesn't add up to be equal. Common Core. And a 21-18 loss to the Commies leaves the New York Giants at 0-2 with the trip to the land of Cleve or a matchup against the Browns. Whatever. My explanation is more fun. We're going to do what we've done for most of the year last year. We're going to do what we've done most of the year last year and go positive, negative, and preview. So, Jay, a positive from the 0-2 Giants in this week 2 game that needs to continue on to week 3. A lot of stuff to improve on, though, in this one.
Yeah, I mean, the positive that I took away from was the burgeoning Jones-Neighbors connection, that last 4th down play aside. Now, I'm not one for moral victories in sports, but what happened in our nation's capital last Sunday was pretty much the definition of the term. Now, for all intents and purposes, the Giants lost the game when their number 1 pick dropped a catchable pass on that 4th down as they were driving for what would have been the put-away score. But despite the heartbreaking way the game played out, the Giants may have found their offensive identity, a heavy dose of Daniel Jones to Malik Neighbors, especially on crossing routes, and possibly the return of some design runs with Jones. Now, after a week 1 performance where he was constantly harassed, 38.8% of his dropbacks were under pressure, resulting in 5 sacks, 7 hurries, 7 hits, and him looking very uncomfortable, resulting in a completion percentage of just 52.4, a yards per attempt of just 4.4, 0 touchdowns against, 2 picks, and a 44.3 passer rating. Jones looked demonstrably calmer and more decisive in week 2, taking just 1 sack and committing 0 turnovers. Amazing what having some actual pass protection can do, not only for a quarterback, but an offense in general. Jones completed 57.1% of his passes. His yards per attempt was up to 6.4. His touchdown to interception ratio reversed, 2 scores versus 0 picks, and he had an even 100 passer rating, along with 5 carries for 32 yards rushing. That's 6.4 a pop, reminding fans and defenses alike that he is still a threat with his legs. Now, Jones felt he did a better job, but also felt there were some areas to work on and improve. And head coach Brian Daboll concurred, saying of his quarterback, quote, "I thought Jones improved, continued to try and do that, made good decisions, threw the ball where he needed to throw the ball. The where was wherever Neighbors was on the field, as the rookie wide receiver was the target on 18 of Jones's 28 passes, catching 10 of them for 127 yards, 12.7 average, and his very first NFL touchdown." Now, Daboll said he was comfortable with one player getting that many targets. No other Giant receiver was targeted more than 4 times or racked up more than 33 yards receiving against Washington. Those 18 targets tied Neighbors for the 5th most by any rookie in a single game in the Super Bowl era. Another former LSU turned Giants receiver, Odell Beckham Jr., has the rookie record, getting targeted 21 times in a single game back on December 18th of 2014. Now, overall, through 2 games, Neighbors has 25 of the Giants' 65 pass targets. That's 38.4%, the highest target percentage in the NFL. Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp is second at 36%. Now, it may be a lot to ask a rookie to carry the Giants offense, but Jones continuing to target Neighbors at that rate seems to be the best way for the offense to be productive. Another way is for the offensive line to gel, allowing for Jones to become more and more comfortable in the pocket. He was pressured on just 9 of his 28 dropbacks against Washington, and he moved well in the pocket when he felt that pressure. Now, part of that was due to a deliberate use of max protection blocking schemes. 19 of Jones's 28 dropbacks had 6 or more blockers. Expect that to continue on Sunday, along with some designed rollouts to combat the Browns' formidable pass rush, led by sack machine Myles Garrett, who has averaged 13.6 quarterback takedowns over the past 6 seasons. Now, effectively utilizing the aforementioned crossing routes will go a long way against those defenses. Jumped myself. Jones had a 58.6 passer rating under pressure and a 113 passer rating when he had a clean pocket and time to throw. A disparity in passer rating when under pressure as opposed to not applies to all quarterbacks, but Jones is significantly better when he doesn't feel like his pocket is a house of cards about to collapse. And while an efficient showing against a mediocre defense doesn't mean Danny Dimes is all the way back, but it's the type of game he needed after the utter Charlie Foxtrot of week 1. The true tests come over the next 2 weeks against the Browns and Cowboys, who have definitively better defenses than the Commanders. Now, effectively utilizing those aforementioned crossing routes will go a long way against those defenses as they play to Neighbors' dynamic ability as a runner, allowing him to quickly pick up yards after the catch in the open field. He leads the NFL with 5 catches of 20-plus yards due to his ability to do so. On the Giants' opening drive of the game, Neighbors had a 28-yard gain after getting wide open on a crossing route on a 3rd and 12. He bookended that with a 25-yard gain on 3rd and 9 crosser on the Giants' final drive. On the Giants' second quarter touchdown drive right before halftime, Neighbors twice caught short passes and spun away from defenders, creating a total of 34 yards after the catch. His touchdown, a 4-yard connection with Jones to culminate that second quarter drive, also came on a crossing route over the middle. Now, will the Browns and or Cowboys give Neighbors the type of one-on-one opportunities that he and Jones can exploit? You'd think it'd be a no-brainer to minimize those opportunities, but it will depend on whether those defenses will have the services of the cornerbacks they'd use to follow Neighbors all over the field. For Cleveland, it's Denzel Ward. For Dallas, it's Trayvon Diggs, both of whom are currently banged up. But no matter the scheme used to try and take Neighbors away, Jones will likely still do everything possible to get him the ball, especially in high leverage situations when converting on 3rd and or 4th down is needed to keep a drive in plus territory going. The only play type Jones and Neighbors couldn't get in sync on against Washington was deep balls. Jones targeted Neighbors 4 times on deep shots, but they could not connect. Being able to hit a couple 3 of those this week will add an extra dimension to the Giants passing game. It's a small sample size, but Jones to Neighbors is already reminding fans of Eli to OBJ, and they're hoping this is just the beginning of more of that type of quarterback to wide receiver success.
Well, quarterback X to wide receiver success, considering, by the way, 25 targets, second most in the NFL of anybody.
Total, right?
Second most total, and the cup thing is a little skewed because no Nakua in the second game and really no other wide receiver depth after that. But you got to look for someone like Wan'Dale Robinson to start doing a little bit more than just working on that touchdown. It has to be somebody who has to be a solid number 2 option to make Jones comfortable. Otherwise, it's going to be a tough day, although Myles Garrett is also banged up. But who isn't? It's the NFL. This is what it is. Anthony, when you score 3 touchdowns and don't let up a touchdown and become the first team in NFL history to lose a game exactly that way, got to have some negatives. Give me one.
You know what? I have to deal with the coaching, and that's pretty much on all 3 facets of the game. I gotta start with the defense. And Shane Bolin was supposed to be a guy that comes in and fix the run defense, but that's not been the case. And particularly last week, the Giants got gashed for 215 yards total on the ground. Brian Robinson Jr. muscled away for 133 yards on 7.8 yards per rush. Jaden Daniels, 23-29, 226 as a passer, but also added 44 yards as a passer. And also a lot of broken coverage in the back end of the zone coverage. There was a lot of miscommunication, guys getting open, particularly in that final drive. There was a mix-up in coverage that led to a big play. But on the offensive side, too, and this is what Brian Daboll obviously called the plays. Hey, look, the good news is he's getting the ball to Neighbors any chance he gets. The bad news is you feel like the offense is becoming too much
one-dimensional.
Being a little too one-dimensional. And even the Fox broadcast actually pointed out that Daniel Jones against Minnesota and even in that game against Washington has this tendency of being kind of tunnel vision and always locking into a receiver that he's going to throw the ball to, which allows the defense to kind of make a play on the ball because they know it's coming. And it's just kind of a head scratch that in year 6 of Daniel Jones' career, he still is not being able to look off defensive players in the secondary or in the linebacker level to try to open up those passing windows. If I'm a linebacker or defensive back and I see where you're throwing the ball, it's pretty easy for me to make a play on it. But we're seeing that a lot. But just 4 targets apiece to Darius Slayton and Walter Robinson, and there was before about Jalen Holly wanting to be traded, he denied it. So there's a lot of a mess going on as far as the locker room is concerned. And of course, I have to bring up the obvious. When your starting kicker, Graham Cano, ends up on the injury list 40 hours prior to a game, you probably want to get a second kicker just for reassurance.
They had one on the roster. They didn't elevate him.
They didn't elevate him.
And they had an open roster spot to go for it, and they
knew
had to
Gano
do
was iffy.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. Gano gets injured again, and obviously Jamin Gillen, the punter, who was not used to being a place kicker, missed his only point after a try after a touchdown. And the Giants are forced to go for 2 after every score. And when obviously you're chasing points the rest of the way, this is what happens. This is how you can score 3 touchdowns and still lose a game despite giving up just 7 field goals. This is what happened. And yes, you have to think about the coaching, because right now you're seeing reports of players being, discontent, not being happy with Brian Daboll. There's the Harris situation that hit the news wire today. Then you look at the play on the field. I mean, this is the second year in a row they're 0-2. They got a tough game on the road against Cleveland, and they have a short week. They play the Cowboys, and we know the Giants have not done well against the Giants Cowboys under any circumstances in the last 2 years. Even the year the Giants made the playoffs 2 years ago, the Cowboys swept that season series. So a lot. If you think the pressure on Brian Daboll is on now, let them drop to 0-3 or possibly 0-4 by the end of next Friday. And oh boy, I mean, look, I like Brian Daboll, but the coach of the year shine that he had for 2022 has completely evaporated from everything that happened last year to now this year. He can't blame the offensive play caller or someone else, because he's the guy calling the plays now. Defensively, it was supposed to be a change of philosophy, maybe not too blitz happy, but now we're seeing issues with just the zone coverage and miscommunication on that end. And obviously, the situation with the place kicking last week.
And I'm going to stop you there. I want to go back to one quick thing on that as well that I've realized. Gano getting injured on the opening kickoff. When you have a punter in there, he can also do kickoffs. And if Graham Gano is hobbled, which was seen in warm-ups, you don't want to put him on the field longer than you have to. And he gets literally injured on a tackle. It's just not thinking in situations where you're almost playing dumb percentages, and it's just common sense. It really is just common sense after all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Common sense is not what Deshaun Watson has had in his career since leaving Houston.
That's the understatement of the year.
That is the understatement of the millennium. And we can talk about the new allegation that has come out over the last few weeks, the fact that he is a $235 million quarterback who, thank God, has been since surpassed by about 9 other different quarterbacks to become the highest paid quarterback in the league. But I'll talk about his play because I don't want to give you a soliloquy and be here until 1 a.m. Eastern time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's talk about his week 1 performance was terrible. We'll talk about that in a whole. Let's talk about his week 2 performance first. 22 of 34 for 186 yards and adding a 1-yard rushing touchdown. He looked a little more better and a little more comfortable in the pocket. And the difference in opponent between the Cowboys and Jaguars, 47-point drubbing by the Saints aside for the Cowboys. It's still a pretty good elite defense when it needs to be. is a little bit different. Now, he also had a good game with his new wide receiver, the free agent from Denver, Jerry Jeudy, 5 catches for 73 yards. But in the first 2 games with him and the star, number 1, the WR1, the wide receiver 1 in the Cam and Amari Cooper, and my fantasy team knows this very well, 3 receptions for 11 yards over the first 2 games. And after halftime, they only scored 3 points. He looked comfortable in the pocket in this game, but not good overall. Now, as in passing grades, Cleveland currently ranks 13th, but their wide receiving grades is at 55.2. That's 30th in the NFL. They've had trouble getting the ball downfield consistently, which eventually is what you wanted to do with Deshaun Watson in the very first place when you got him. Watson is 9-5 as Cleveland's starter, but it's 15 touchdown passes for him against 11 interceptions and a paltry quarterback rating of 78.2. That's not QBR. I'm talking about just overall. And he was only 78.8 rating in what I just mentioned in that last game that I was talking about. 1,250 yards. Amari Cooper had 1,250 yards last season. So where he is now is just not acceptable at all. There is a lot of options that this team has. They've built a lot of good players around them offensively, although they don't have tight end David Njoku right now due to injury.
Yeah, that's going to hurt.
Yeah, well, it's been hurting already. Deshaun Watson just needs to live up to anything close to what his contract has set. Because right now, what the Cleveland Browns could be getting for the quarterback position could easily be replicated by his backup, Jameis Winston. And that's saying something. You could possibly get better numbers out of Winston at this point. Watson is becoming a broken man in that quarterback position. And if he can't get his game going against the Giants defense, who, even though they didn't allow a touchdown last week, they also didn't didn't allow a punt either, because that wasn't an option, because the team didn't get punted against you. Never had a 3-and-out. Never stopped. Only stopped the Commanders. Couldn't get them off the field at all. If you can't get it right against the New York Giants, there's going to be many more questions for you on Monday morning. So Deshaun Watson, it may seem like a Captain Obvious pick, but this is the player that you're going to have to watch out for Sunday for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, Rabbi, you're correct that he is resembling a broken man as an individual, but his play, the mediocrity of his play is becoming a broken record, and it won't be long before Cleveland fans and potentially the media are calling for a change of tune and demanding that Jameis Winston get under center.
And I know it's just been a bad year overall, quarterback-wise. I mean, for God's sakes, Trevor Lawrence had 16 yards of passing going into the first half last week. A Lions punter who faked a punt for a first down had more passing yards in the half than Trevor Lawrence did. So it's hard to judge the quarterback position, but we've seen some bad quarterback play and disappointing quarterback play, and Deshaun Watson definitely qualifies in that disappointing quarterback play. Ironically enough, a team that doesn't have bad quarterback play is the New York Jets. Who would have known, at least for now. 11 days, guys, is not a long time. I mean, I think we've had more than 11 days between shows. Sorry about that. But the 2024 Jets, only the third team since 2012 to start their season with 3 games in 11 days. Oh, by the way, the 2018 Jets are one of the other 2 teams, so they're a little bit of a vendetta against them. Who knows? But they finished that stretch with an exclamation point in the boldest type possible, 24-3, a not as dominant as the score suggests, win at home against the New England Patriots. And after securing the first win against the artist formerly known as the most feared team in the NFL, that's their first win at home against them in 9 years. The Denver Broncos are next on the docket. They await next Sunday. Hello, Sean Payton. Jets offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett may take things a little more personal now that he has number 8 at his disposal in this matchup in 2024. Same questions, Jay, except a lot easier to find a positive. Give you one that needs to continue.
Yeah, and because these are actual victories as opposed to moral ones, this guy, it's going to take a lot less time. I mean, the positive need to continue is straight up vintage prime era Aaron Rodgers performances continuing. Yeah, it's the captain obvious answer here, but considering he lasted all of 4 plays last season and was final season in Green Bay average through the first 2 weeks of this season, 60.8% completion, 171.5 yards per game passing, 6.7 yards per attempt, 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and just a 92.2 passer rating. It wasn't unreasonable to ask if this is who Aaron Rodgers is at this stage of his career. Granted, even if these 2 weeks were as good as the Jets were going to get from an almost 41-year-old in his 20th season, it still would have been a huge improvement from the Zach Wilson era. Yes, I know, it is a ridiculously low bar. But after what I saw on Thursday Night Football, where the Jets blew out the New England Patriots 24-3 in their first AFC East game, I could be persuaded that the previous 2 games were Rodgers simply knocking off the rust of not having played a full regular season NFL game since January 8 of 2022. The 4-time MVP put up numbers reminiscent of his halcyon days, slinging the ball around the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. 27 of 35. That is a 77.1% completion percentage. 281 yards, 8.0 yards per attempt. 2 touchdowns, 0 picks, a 118.9 passer rating. He completed passes to 8 different receivers, with tight end Tyler Conklin leading the way with 5 catches for 93 yards. That's 18.6 per catch. The chemistry the two of them developed in camp was on full display Thursday night. If they can maintain that chemistry and connection, the Jets' passing game will have a dimension beyond just the 3-headed wide receiver monster of rising star Garrett Wilson, a resurrected Allen Lazard, and combat catch king Mike Williams. Rodgers also seems to have no ill effects from his rehabbed Achilles, as he scrambled 3 times, twice running for first downs. Rodgers' 2 touchdown passes went to friends old Lazard, who he's already connected on 3 times for touchdowns, just like their days in Green Bay, and new Wilson, who he connected with for the first of what Jets fans are hoping are a multitude of touchdown passes. That touchdown pass was the 480th of Rodgers' career, putting him 28 passes behind his old pal Brett Favre for 4th all time. And here's a little stat nugget from that. Per NFL research, Garrett Wilson is the first wide receiver drafted in the first round to catch a touchdown pass from Rodgers. The only other first-round pick of any kind to catch a touchdown pass from Rodgers, tight end Mercedes Lewis in 2019. The Jets have scored at least 3 touchdowns in each of their first 3 games of 2024. They did that twice in all of 2023. The offense has better playmakers and a better offensive line than it did last year. And the 2 key returning playmakers, Wilson, who had 5 catches for 33 yards on that touchdown, and running back Breece Hall, who had 16 carries for 54 yards rushing and 4 catches for 29 yards receiving, are finally 100% healthy. But if Rodgers shredding secondaries like this is what the Jets will get each week going forward, then even with some injury losses on defense, gangrene may still make some noise in the AFC. And with winnable games the next 2 weeks, at home for Denver in week 4, as we said, and then at Minnesota in week 5, it's not unreasonable to think they could be 4-1 heading into a week 6 Monday Night Football battle with Josh Allen and the division rival Bills.
And the fact that they have Allen, their running back, who is also Braylon Allen, their other running back, that's also kind of giving them kind of a Jekyll and Hyde or a Thunder and Lightning in the backfield too. It's kind of the best case scenario right now for the Jets, although it showed. You looked at the schedule, you saw the San Francisco game, the San Francisco team that may not be anywhere near that level for the next 2 months, and then saw the next few games, and the Jets had the opportunity to not panic and bounce back, even though the Titans game was a little iffy, to say the least, against a what tier would be below 5 for Will Levis? I think it would be tier 6.
The last time we had this conversation, you said 7. So
that was before I've seen some plays this year where the coach literally said the words, "Are you effing kidding me?"
And it was rightfully so. You know what? He was
It's
well
tough to
within
find.
his rights to say it. That
Yeah.
was absolutely one of the dumbest things I have ever seen a quarterback attempt to do.
And ironically enough, it's not as dumb as the pass he threw against the Bears. There are so many things, and I kind of maybe want to talk about that even more. I feel like I'm shitting on quarterbacks right now.
Well, you know what, Rabbi?
Terrible play this year.
I feel an NFL roundtable on the overwhelming amount of mediocre quarterback play in the NFL season is in our future on this show.
It sure is, and I hope it's not because we've seen some bad play in the first 3 weeks. Anthony, you're tasked with finding the negative for what the Jets don't need to do for week 4, and there's not a lot, but the penalties are hurting.
Excuse me. Yeah, the penalties for the Jets starting to pile up a little bit. They had a clean game against the 49ers in the first game of the season. But you think about last week against the Titans, they had some pretty big penalties, including a buff for the passer penalty. That 5 of the Jets 7 penalties last week were on the defensive side of the football. So that's one they have to clean up. And then it only got even worse against New England. They had a total of 10 penalties overall, but 7 was especially on the offensive side of football. It cost the Jets a drive that they were marching downfield on. So that's something that the Jets definitely going to have to clean up because the penalties are starting to get a little more kind of undisciplined and a little sloppy. On the defensive side of the football, after the first week, I mean, it can only go up. I mean, you get gashed for over 400 yards against a 49ers team. That's going to be, like you said, Rabbi, it's going to be a shell of itself in the next few games at least with the injuries they're dealing with. Yeah, it has you second guessing a lot of things. And think about this last week. The Titans wasn't afraid to throw at Sauce Gardner because they were able to get 5 completions, 97 yards on Gardner's side of field, and he gave up a touchdown. The defense is a lot better against the New England Patriots, but let's be honest, the Patriots are not a good offensive team. This is like the equivalent of getting a perfect score on a test that was open book. I mean, you probably should do that, but it doesn't help that the Patriots are just so offensively inept. Defensively for the Jets, they got after the quarterback. They were able to get 5 sacks. Will McDonald got 2 on his own. The Patriots managed 139 yards, 78 of those on the ground. So it's definitely a good start. By the way, we're talking about the penalties. The only points that New England was able to score came as a result of a pass interference penalty on DJ Reed. So obviously, the penalties and undisciplined portion of that part of the game has to be cleaned up. But defensively, the Jets were a lot better. They pretty much shut down the Patriots offense with offense that they have. Ran Jacoby Brissett out of the game. So it's something definitely that the Jets can build on. They have a lot of injuries as well. They lost Jermaine Johnson for the season, tore Achilles. CJ Mosley's banged up, and obviously Reddick is still holding out. So they have some holes in the defensive side of football that is going to be an issue. And they have the mini bye to kind of clean up some things on the defensive side, but also the penalties too, because I don't know if they got away with it because Tennessee and New England are not good football teams, but as the season, it's not a statement, but as the opponent quality goes up, that's something that could definitely hurt them in the long run. So they're gonna have to be a little more disciplined on the field and stop drawing so many penalties, but also penalties that are keeping drives alive or even killing offensive drives when they have the football.
Okay, so let's talk about Denver and let's the next opponent, which will be next Sunday, and let's talk about Bo Nix. He was asked a question, very literal, after Corey Trice Jr. Intercepted him in the end zone on Sunday. The reporter asked Bo Nix to walk him through that play, and he said the following: drop back, threw it to the other team. That's it. That was the explanation, and you know what? I'm perfectly okay with that explanation. let's have more people not ask the stupid question of what happened with that interception, because you know what happened with that interception. Yeah, threw it back, dropped back and threw it to the other team. Not good. Speaking of dropbacks, by the way, that's not Bo Nix's game. That wasn't Bo Nix's game coming out of college. That's not what Bo Nix did to make him good in Oregon and Auburn. So, in his first 2 games, he's dropped back 44 times. And it has made, as Denver Post Troy Rennick said, the quarterback is not blameless while guiding an offense that cannot find the end zone with Google Maps. Literally, I can't find the end zone with too many Google Maps as well. But so the Broncos, 5th in passing attempts, 25th in rushes. It doesn't mean anything at all. And so with the first 2 games that Bo Nix has played against Seattle and Pittsburgh, ironically enough, they're both 2-0 teams with both pretty damn good defenses. 5 yards an attempt, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. By the way, that EPA per play in week 2 ranked 30th in the league at -0.429. And one of the 2 starting quarterbacks who had it worse is Bryce Young. And he ain't going to be seeing the field for a little while after he got benched this week from Carolina. The other one, by the way, was Anthony Richardson. This year, Nix is only ahead of, again, Bryce Young, and ironically enough, Deshaun Watson in success rate, 33.7%, while struggling to generate any offense. While Nix is the quarterback of the future, picked him 12th overall in draft, and you now have lost a lineman in there as well to make it even worse for this team. It's just struggling big time for them. They're going to Tampa Bay this week. Doesn't seem like too good of an option as well. Has not been able to find Cortland Sutton too, by the way. Only 5 completions in 2 games for 64 yards. No run game either to speak of. Javonte Williams has averaged 1.5 yards per carry in the back of a line that's now hurting. Nix's red zone efficiency is dead last, 14.29%. 29th on third down, 23.3%. And he has, I believe, a rushing touchdown. That's it. By the way, all of the rookie quarterbacks right now after 2 weeks, absolutely no throwing touchdowns. There is a thing about you're going to go through a lot of struggles when you're a rookie. You're going to go through hard times, but Sean Payton isn't making it any easier for Bo Nix. And frankly, it's just going to be a struggle. There can be games where you can get right on the right day. But if you're a quarterback that, again, as a reporter said, can't find the end zone even with the help of Google Maps, you're going to be behind the 8 ball regardless. And we'll see what happens as Bo Nix will be playing his 4th game next week, unless he gets benched. I don't know. Owners are a little finicky, and this could mean all for naught in 2 days. But there's still a lot to improve in the Mile High City. I thought Denver would be a better team. I know Nix is an older quarterback than some, but a rookie is a rookie, and it's showing very much so far. All right, guys. Let's move on to the final segment of this show. Finally, for the Miami Dolphins, one of the Jets' rivals in the AFC East, the unfortunate concussion of quarterback Tua Tagovailoa has made an unpleasant return and did so 8 days ago versus the Miami Dolphins. After a spur-of-the-moment dive, this was Tua's 4th confirmed concussion in just the span of 2 years. And remember, there was a reported one that he had 2 in the Buffalo game 2 years ago. So this is probably more like 5 in that span. And while Tua is now on the IR and out for a minimum of 4 games, there's been a lot more talk about the health over the last week and well-being of Miami's franchise star. So, Anthony, in my mind, this isn't really a question of should he keep playing because we don't know anything in his support system, and that's up to him, really. But what do you think the future holds for Tua Tagovailoa?
I would say this. During time, I said this on the show. Sometimes you have to protect the athlete from themselves. I mean, if it was up to me, I would ask Tua, who, by the way, in the offseason, became a father for the first time, and it's a question you pull them to the side and just ask them, is it worth it in the long run to continue going on?
Mhm.
Unfortunately, and the thing is, it's the decision's still his at the end of the day. I mean, I've heard Antonio Pills come out and saying, there's been a number of players. Des Bryant said, talked about it on Twitter, and there've been a number of players, former players that have said that they would, if it was up to him, they would tell him to move on from football. And that hasn't changed from a decade ago, and the fact that yeah, the idea of concussions and CTE and head and brain injuries are being taken more seriously and looked at as from a player's perspective. Coincidentally enough, I actually didn't think about this till today. Maybe Tua, if he's going to continue playing, should consider wearing uh, a Guardian cap
Yeah.
because that is something that the league are allowing players to do this season. And look, that's not the most fashionable thing in the world. I get that, but you're not taking a film to put on a fashion show. This isn't James. This isn't James Harden NBA pregame show. This is basically to protect yourself from a possible head injury. And we've seen a couple of players in a sporadic, a handful of games this season wearing a Guardian cap. And obviously, there's you will kind of a covering that resembles the actual playing helmets on the field. So if you're watching the game live, unless it's Zoom, man, you wouldn't even notice the difference. But yeah, that is something that if Tua's going to continue playing, he should consider doing. Maybe wearing a Guardian helmet that may help him in the long run and prevent another concussion. But it is something that you have to think about long term. I mean, long term health. There was a report that he took his family to Disney World. There were no concussion symptoms that he was dealing with. Um, but you have to think about Tua the man. I think that the football player kind of comes secondary at that point, and it's up to him if he wants to see him play or not. But the Miami Dolphins obviously uh they can go through every test possible to ensure that he's actually physically capable of playing football again this season whenever if he chooses to do so. But if not, I mean, you gotta think if he decides to walk away from it, you have to look at it from life after football too, because it's like, hey, look, you have a family now, and it's not about you anymore. And
No.
that's something that, for Tua talking about, well, he's a young man that right now all of the options have to be on the table for him. But at the end of the day, it's his decision.
Yeah, look, Tua has already stated that his goal is to go through the full concussion protocol and then rehab with the goal of getting himself cleared to return to the field. Whenever that happens, however long that takes, and with the additional requirements that have to be met since his last concussion in 2022, which had him out for an extensive period. There are now 5 phases a player has to go through on the road to being medically cleared to play. So chances are it's likely to be a good long while. I mean, it's nice that he has said he wants to get back. A lot can happen over the amount of time it's going to take before he's even close to that. He's going to need to get cleared by the Dolphins team physician in addition to an independent neurologist as part of that 5-phase plan to return to play. The Dolphins will likely be, as you said, Anthony, overly careful with their franchise quarterback, especially after what happened in 2022 when Tua was seemingly allowed to return before he was fully recovered and sustained at least one more concussion, which actually prompted a joint investigation by the NFL and the NFLPA's medical professionals. Miami started that process, Rabbi, as you said, by officially putting Tua on IR. So bare minimum, he'll miss at least the next 4 games. And since Miami has its bye week in week 6, the earliest he could return is week 8 against the Arizona Cardinals. Dolphin fans, don't hold your breath. And while I understand where all those former players who took to social media in the aftermath of Tua being taken off the field were coming from imploring the Dolphins quarterback to retire, as you said, Anthony, it's ultimately his decision. As my head coach Mike McDaniel said, quote, bringing up his future is not in the best interest of him. I'm going to plead with everybody that does genuinely care. That should be the last thing on your mind, end quote. And I agree with McDaniel's sentiments 100%. None of the factors that will be part of the down the road future should be part of any conversations right now or questions to ask at upcoming Dolphins game week, game day media sessions. Yes, there is a financial aspect to this situation for both the quarterback and the organization, as certain media folk have broken down. But with the relationship that Tua has, not only with ownership, but more importantly with McDaniel, it feels like the personal aspect will be at the forefront for all concerned. The Dolphins seem to be all about protecting and supporting a member of their family, with their hopes confined to only his return to full health and being able to lead a quality life. In the aftermath of it, of the concussion, the hit where he literally slammed helmet first into DeBar Hamlin's chest, McDaniel kissed his quarterback on the head as he came off the field, told him, quote, he's the starting quarterback of his family, and told him to go into the locker room, take a deep breath, and I'll see you soon. And then he had a single message for his quarterback afterwards saying, quote, all I'm telling Tua is everyone is counting on you to be a dad this weekend, and then we'll move on from there. Now, while it may seem to all those former players who weighed in that this is a binary 0 or 1, either or type of decision, it so very much is not. As McDaniel said on Monday, quote, I'm just worried about the human being, and that's where that's at day to day. I'll let Tua be the champion of his own career and speak to that. And as Mike Jones, the national NFL writer for The Athletic, wrote in his piece on Monday, it's not so simple, however. How do you tell a young man that he's unfit for work? How do you tell him that he can no longer live his dream? Anthony, you and I both played football, though we topped out at the high school level. We know what it's like in some shape, manner, or form, what being hit like that is. And as someone who played quarterback, part of the reason I stopped playing was not because I wasn't going to grow beyond my current height and have a shot at college football. It's because I kind of got tired of getting slammed by guys who outweighed me by 50 pounds more than I enjoyed throwing touchdown passes. Look, Tua has shown that he can play quarterback at a very high level, especially in this offense with the playmakers at his disposal. Completed 69.3% of his passes last season, threw 29 touchdowns, had a 101 passer rating, and his 4,624 passing yards led the NFL. But he has a lengthy history of injuries besides the concussions that has those same former players feeling like he's just not built to handle the constant violence of professional football. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but ultimately it'll be to his decision, and whichever one he makes will be the right one for him and his family, and we all need to leave it at that.
Exactly, and I would actually also say this about Tua. I would say that I never have, at least until recently, ever taken a player's injury history into account in terms of what their legacy is. I don't think that Tua is in any way, shape, or form should ever be questioned as, oh, he's too weak to do this, he's too weak to do that. No, there are certain circumstances where this stuff will happen. His training doesn't allow for that because it'll all happen during regular season games. Now, before I make this final point, I want to shout out or shout down any of the people who are ever on social media who immediately jump and give their professional opinion under the guise of being a doctor on Twitter to basically say, this is what I think is going to happen. This is what injury I think he sustained, and this is how many weeks he's out. I would like to ban those people first rather than anybody else. I did not ask you for your opinion, and that is not what I care about at all. And I'm sick and tired of seeing all of those people give their unsolicited professional medical advice on social media. I will now finish off with the actual advice and words of a true person who is one of the foremost people on concussions in all of sports, and Anthony would know him real well. His name is Chris Nowinski. He got a PhD from Harvard. He is a former wrestler with the WWE who had to retire due to concussion injuries in 2003. This is based on the injury itself, and obviously he said he suffered a traumatic injury, no question. And yes, if you're a real doctor, you can mention this on Twitter because I actually care about what words you're trying to say. And his right arm had showed a fencing posture.
Yep.
indicating a loss of consciousness, and had to obviously immediately got diagnosed and missing a game. Now, he also said there is no magic number of concussions to require retirement. It doesn't mean that after you have 5 in 3 years, it doesn't mean you have to retire. It just means that it could lead to chronic symptoms and mental health disorders. But then also mentions that this is the truth. Doctors who advise athletes to retire in the absence of symptoms that are lasting over a year, that means of the current concussion, and has with brain bleeds and gross MRI changes, those people could easily get blacklisted. So it's almost never easy to find an actual opinion that can be considered independent and made for the best situation, not just of Tua. Tua could also seek a different doctor. That's what the tough situation is of all of this stuff. Overall, again, the decision is only his, and anybody who has any idea to call for anybody's retirement after any situation is kind of short-sighted and is almost going more for a look at me aspect than a look at him aspect. And that kind of sickens me and annoys me. But if you're ever going to do that, listen to the real words of neuroscientists that you know are actually neuroscientists, because those people will not ever call for an immediate retirement based on injury history. Every case is different. And again, the choice is Tua's, and Tua's one.
Yep.
For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I am merely the inspiration to Green Day's Wake Me Up When September Ends. Don't keep going to sleep. Stephen Rabinowitz. Are you watching us live tonight on Facebook? Great. You know what to do. Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines is where you go to see us live. YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines on demand as well. And Jay?
Our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sportslines, where you'll find links to each new show, including this one in the morning, along with tidbits and nuggets from the world of sports that we think are worth your time to check out. This week, there's a link to a story by Alec Lewis, the Minnesota Vikings beat writer for The Athletic, on legendary Hall of Fame quarterback Fran Tarkenton. The crazy running around to escape the pass rush and buy time on passing plays or pick up yards scrambling that you see Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Caleb Williams and other NFL quarterbacks engage in. Tarkenton, who played for the Giants and Vikings over his 18-year career, is the OG of that style of play, and the case could seriously be made that he invented it. Read the piece, and you'll understand why.
That's the only time Caleb Williams, Patrick Mahomes, and Caleb Williams and Patrick Mahomes will ever be in the same sentence, probably for the next 5 years.
This season,
all right, at least for now. We'll talk to you next time on Sports Lines. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.